after me. I'm a man. I'm 40.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Nick DiMartino. That's Liam Barwick. We're back for another episode of Moving the Goalpost. Just want to get out of the way. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart. Follow Liam at Liam MTGP. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network on social media on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok at ETB Network. You can follow this show at MTGP ETB on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And you can follow all the Empty the Bench Network shows on YouTube.com/ETB Network, where you can find this show and other Empty the Bench shows. You can find all Empty the Bench podcasts at etbpodcast.com, and you can listen to Moving the Goalposts wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to like and subscribe. And of course, we are presented by. This podcast is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. Okay, so let's get into the show. Just now it was, we just saw game one of the NBA Finals, and I will have to say, I think you were kind of right about the Celtics. I think the media, I got it a little bit wrong. I think the thing I got wrong about the Celtics the most was the fact that I didn't realize how much of an X factor Porzingis would have been. He's obviously I guess I just didn't realize how big of a deal it was going to be for Porzingis to be back. And the Celtics, I guess sometimes I underestimated them a little bit. Certainly underestimated the whole Porzingis factor. And it's also worth noting, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic had a good game. Kyrie Irving had a bad game. He put up like 12 points, couldn't hit a three, which obviously hurt them a lot. I took the Mavericks plus 6.5, which certainly hurt me, which I'm not too happy about. I'm still rooting for the Mavericks, obviously, but I just, based on, and now look, I'd be the first to tell you that a series doesn't start until a team steals a game on the road. But right now, this series sort of feels not over, but I'm really leaning towards the Celtics. Not just so much because they won, but because they won in the way that they did. And, given that they have home court game 7, so even if it were to go 7 games, I still would take the Celtics. But right now, the Celtics, they just look like a better team. There's no two ways about it. Right now, the Celtics look like a better team. I mean, maybe it's true that the Mavericks ceiling is higher, but the ceiling is not going to happen every game. Maybe if Luka and Kyrie get really, really hot or something like that. But the Celtics, they just have so many pieces right now. I mean, Porzingis dominated the game, and he's a bench player, which goes to show you something. So yeah, I don't know. You have any thoughts on this?
It was a complete ass whooping from start to finish. End to end ass whooping. The game was close in the first maybe 5-6 minutes or whatever it was, until Porzingis came in and he was completely dominant. He was completely dominant for a few minutes in a row. He didn't really do. He had he had 12 points in the first quarter, and he ended up with eight more for the rest of the game. So he wasn't as completely dominant, and he didn't play as much in the second half, but he was completely dominant from the first quarter on both ends of the floor. The Celtics had no answer for him defensively. They were not good when he was on the floor. I watched a lot of Sports Center before work today, and it was like I said last week. Tim Legler picked the Mavericks. Both the guys on Pardon the Interruption picked the Mavericks. 3 out of the 4 people on Around the Horn picked the Mavericks. And I just simply don't see it. Again, the Celtics have dominated this playoffs. They completely dominated today. And I disagree that the Mavericks have a higher ceiling because they have 2 great players. Like you said, Kyrie Irving wasn't terrific. Kyrie Irving, by the way, is 0-6 in Boston and 1-11 overall against the Celtics since he stepped on the logo. And that one win was in the next game, by the way. So he's lost 11 in a row to the Celtics. He didn't have a great game. Doncic had he had a lot of points, but I don't think that anyone watching that would say that he had a really terrific game.
Right.
And I disagree that the Mavericks have a higher ceiling because the Celtics are just so much better. Besides those 2 guys, the Celtics are just so much better. And it was a very NBA game in that it was 21 at halftime, and the Mavericks pulled it down to, what did they pull it down to, like 6 at one point?
Yeah.
And it looked like that we were going to have a close game. And then Jaylen Brown took the game over, sort of the same way Porzingis did in this first quarter, in the third quarter. And it went from 21 at the end of the second quarter to 6 at one point, and then back to 21 by the end of the third quarter. So besides a little bit of a run where the Mavericks got it down to 6, Boston just completely dominated the game in every facet of the game. The Mavericks are one of the best offensive teams in the NBA, and they scored 89 points, and they really scored about 75 points in times when it mattered. So this was complete domination, and I agreed with something that Dave Portnoy said at the end of the game today, which was, if it goes longer than 5, I'd be stunned.
When I said that the Mavericks might have a higher ceiling, I mean, first of all, I said might. Like, I'm not certain of that. I would say that, yes, I did say they have a higher ceiling. I also was going to say they also have a much lower floor, I think, than the Celtics do. I think the Celtics are much more regulated in terms of the potential. I think that at some point in this series, the Mavericks will have a really big game, probably at home. But you have to remember, we talked about before, basketball, a basketball series is very long. And similar to how, we were talking about the Knicks and the Pacers were able to outlast the Knicks because the series was longer. It is a long series, and there's going to be a lot of games. I don't think it's going to go like this every single time. And you're right. Luka Doncic put up 30 points, but he also took 26 shots. So by Luka Doncic standards, that really isn't that good. And he had 1 assist all game. So you're right. He didn't play. And I watched it. He didn't play
4 for 12 from 3.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, which is not good at all for Luka. And it didn't look. Which, I mean, to be fair, we've seen players have much worse games than this. But the Mavericks cannot afford for Luka. I guess one issue with the Mavericks is that Luka and Kyrie, neither of them can afford to have a bad game. They have to be on their A game every single time. Whereas with the Celtics, it's just different. I mean, we were talking about how good Porzingis was. He only played 21 minutes. It's like, it's almost as if with the Celtics, every single individual player plays like a limited part, but they all contribute almost in their own type of way. I mean, like if you look at like the starting five on the Celtics and on the Mavericks, a lot of the key players, they're getting more rest time. They're not playing as many minutes and there's not as much weight on their shoulders as there is with Dallas right now. And to me, it's like Luka and Kyrie could be unbeatable in some games. They really could be. The thing is, it's a 7-game series, best of 7, and that's not going to happen every time. And they can't afford they can't afford to be off. Like Luka Doncic can't afford the Mavericks can't afford for Luka Doncic to go 12 for 26 from the field again. Like there's just like they can't afford for Kyrie to go 0 for 5 from 3. Like if this keeps happening, there's no, and I'm not saying it will keep happening, but there's just no way the Mavericks can win if it keeps going like this. Now, I wouldn't be stunned if it goes past 5, because to me, I don't think in my mind, a 6-game series can still be a bigger blowout than the 6 games would suggest. It could be true that the Celtics win by blowing them out it could end up being that the Celtics average 20-point victories at home and barely lose to the Mavericks on the road and for 2 games, and it goes 6 games. Even though it's a 6-game series, it still feels like a little bit more of a blowout than the 6 games would suggest that it is. And I mean, look, we don't know exactly how it's going to go every single game. But, like in basketball, it's a long series, and it can go all sorts of ways. So even if, based on what I've seen, I don't think the Mavericks really have much of a chance realistically. I don't see it. I think they can make it a series. I don't see them being able to win it. And you're right. It is weird to me how much the media, so many members of the media, I should say, were so big on Dallas. And I think maybe it is that they're a Boston team, or a lot of them are from New York and don't like Boston, or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's just they feel that the Celtics run was easy and the Mavericks have 2 big stars. But, for me, it's like I'm also looking at the results of these 2 teams head to head. And rarely ever does the team who ends up winning end up losing like this in game 1. It's just like, I just don't feel like I need to see that much more.
Yeah, well, a few things. I mean, first of all, when you mentioned the Knicks-Pacers series, I agree with what you said that the Pacers won because the series extended, but there was never a game for either team. There were a couple of blowouts, but the Knicks blew the Pacers out. The Pacers blew the Knicks out once. Throw away game 7 because guys were injured and all this stuff. But there was never a game where either team looked demonstrably better than the other team on both ends of the court. The Celtics are the better team. No one would argue that the Celtics are not the better team. The argument is that Luka and Kyrie are the 2 best players on the court each night. But the Celtics are a much better team. With the argument, I never understood. Also, like the argument, yes, the Celtics had an easier conference run, and they had a bunch of teams who were injured. But just because they had an easier run also doesn't mean that they're not a terrific team. Just because Alabama plays, the bottom tier of the SEC one year, that doesn't mean that they're not a terrific team. They just had an easier run, but they're still a great team. And the Celtics did exactly what you should do with an easy run, which is they lost 2 games in 3 series, 2 combined games in 3 series. So I agree. I just don't see it. I think they're, Peyton Pritchard was 0 for 7 today. He was 0 for 7 total, and he was 0 for 5 from 3. And he didn't really do much besides shoot. He had 2 assists and 2 fouls. So he was 0 for 7. He was 0 for 5 from 3, and he was a +4, when he was on the court. And that just shows you how much better the Celtics are bench-wise than the Mavericks. That one of their bench players could shoot 0 for 7, and they're still a +4 when he's on the court. They're just a better team. Kyrie did not have a good game, and you have to remember also the Celtics have been here close to 3 years in a row. They were one game away from the finals last year. They were in the finals 2 years ago. They've been here. They're hungry for it. They have much more experience than the Mavericks at being here. They have a better home crowd advantage, and they have the home court. It's gonna be tough for the Mavericks. There's a million. The one thing that I always hate about the NBA Finals, there's a million days in between each game.
Yeah.
So the next game is not till Sunday, and the next game after that is not till Wednesday. But with that being said, if the Celtics, I think the biggest game is going to be Game 3 in Dallas, because I think the Celtics are going to take the next one, and that will be the determiner of if the Mavericks can make it a series or not. If they're going to be able to make it any sort of series, they have to win one. They have to win Game 3.
Right. Well, I think it'll be whether or not they can make it a series will be when they finally play at home. And
that's what I said, Game 3.
Right. And whenever, and it's not just about whether or not they win; it's also how they win. Like I said before, like remember 3 years ago when the Knicks played the Hawks, the Knicks were able to win when they lost in 5 games. Sure, they were able to win one game at home, and it was like a huge deal that they were able to win a game at home. But, they were barely able to win that one game at home. It was just so obvious to me that they were a much worse team, even though they were able to pull off a win. Like, it could be true that it is certainly possible that after Game 3, we will look at the Mavericks and be like, even if they win, we might look at them and be like, yeah, maybe they won this game, but they really don't have much of a chance. They could extend the series, but that might be the extent of what they're able to do. When the Cavs played the Raptors in 2016, for instance, that was a 6-game series, but nobody really thought the Raptors really had much of a chance that whole series. This could end up being the same thing. I think that part of the reason that that many members of the media were predicting the Mavericks was because the Celtics have shown signs of weaknesses going into the series earlier in the playoffs. And in a sense, they did. I think this reminds me of a little bit of an overreaction, though, that you get from the media or from the public when teams end up winning, but they just don't look great. Sometimes teams play down to their competition a little bit. We see it all the time in football. Like in college football, we see teams get eviscerated for barely beating a team, or not even barely beating, for winning a game ugly against a lesser opponent. And it's all like you hear about it all the time. You hear, oh, well, Ohio State only won this game by a field goal and things like that. But you know what? One thing I learned from experience is that that's not always a very good indicator of how good that team is going to be against better competition. It doesn't always work that way. And I think on some level, the Celtics did play down to their competition in some ways. But I just don't think that's necessarily indicative of how it's going to go against against a higher quality opponent. And another thing, obviously, is the star dynamic of Kyrie and Luka. I think that it seems like, look, if I have a choice between all else being equal, if one team has the best player on the court, I would rather have the team with the best player on the court. But I think that sometimes people are so obsessed with having the best player on the court or having the best individual on the team to the point where one team plays so much better as a team overall, the way they're built, that they seem to forget about that. It is very rare where an individual, where the team with the better individual can just beat the team that plays that much better as a team. And like the Celtics, every player has a lot less weight on their shoulders. And to me, I think that's a pretty big sign. I mean, given the fact that we were talking about Porzingis' impact, he didn't even play that much. Like, if he was on the Mavericks, he would have had to play 40 minutes. So, like, that to me is just a huge advantage that Boston has that we haven't really seen very much throughout our lives.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, depth wins championships at the end of the day, honestly, and the Celtics are just the deeper team, and yeah, I don't really know, honestly, if there's much more we can say on it, because that's just sums it up. I think the Celtics have more pieces. They have the better players. The Mavericks have two best players, but they're not that much better than Tatum and Brown, to where it's like a big mismatch in that way. And I just think the Celtics are a mismatch for the Mavericks right now altogether.
Yeah, I think it certainly does look like that. So here's another story that I want to get to, which I find a little surprising. Apparently, Dan Hurley might be going to the Lakers. So the head coach at UConn is in talks with the Lakers. And, for a while we were talking about JJ Redick going to the Lakers because he is LeBron's podcast host. Now that would be a first if we saw a podcast, if a head coach and a player hosted a podcast together. That would obviously be a first. It would be like, I mean, we see it on the Knicks with Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart, but we've never seen it with a head coach. So I think that would be pretty fun. Like some of the tweets about that were very funny. I mean, it is just so obviously the most. I mean, look, I don't care that much about this. I'm not a Laker fan or anything, but LeBron, it is the most obvious example of nepotism that I've ever seen with LeBron right now, where he's trying to get his son on the team, and JJ Redick, who is literally just his podcast co-host, to try to be his head coach. I think that JJ Redick might be a good NBA head coach, although we don't know that yet because he has no experience as a head coach, but he's a very good basketball mind. But Dan Hurley actually has proven it. Just outside of LeBron maybe preferring JJ Redick, Dan Hurley is so obviously a better hire than JJ Redick.
But, well, it has more to do with, I think, what Dan Hurley is going to do than versus what the Lakers, because it seems like the Lakers are set to give him, according to ESPN, a massive deal that has very long term as well. To me, this would seem like a no-brainer move for Dan Hurley. I mean, let's look at it this way. He's won 2 championships in a row at UConn. There's actually literally nothing really more you can do in that. Well, I shouldn't say it like that, but you've hit the pinnacle already. You've hit the top of Everest. You can't go higher. You're going to get a massive deal to move from Storrs, Connecticut to Los Angeles, coach one of the most famous franchises in world sports, coach one of the greatest players ever to play the game, if not the greatest player, in a Laker uniform. It just, for a high pay and guaranteed safety and money, it just doesn't make any sense to me why, if at all, he would stay in Connecticut. To me, this is a no-brainer move. If completely true, the reports are completely true, it's a no-brainer for Danny Hurley. I mean, a real no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just in every possible way, it would be the smart move. And like you said, he has nothing else to prove as a college coach. And that could just be the natural trajectory. Now, to be fair, I think that you can be a good college coach and not be a good head coach. But if you are a good college coach, there's at least a pretty good chance that you'll be a good head coach in the pros. And I mean, like people often talk about Nick Saban being a bad NFL coach. if you actually gave him a chance, he probably could have been a good NFL head coach. It's just that he only coached the NFL for a couple of years and didn't seem to have much, and never really had a desire to go back because he enjoyed his dynasty at Alabama. College coaches tend to not be very loyal. And I'm not saying I'm not saying that as an attack on Dan Hurley at all. I'm not saying he isn't loyal if he goes to LA. But you know what? In college sports, coaches move for better jobs all the time. And sure, Nick Saban stayed at Alabama, but that's because he essentially had king treatment at Alabama. Like he was he couldn't have had a higher standing than he did at Alabama. Whereas UConn, I don't think being the head coach of UConn has quite the same like social standing as you do at Alabama. So moving on to the NBA just for Dan Hurley seems like a logical step. I don't know what's going on in I don't know exactly what he's thinking, but I would be pretty floored if he didn't make that move. I don't know if I mean, but the Lakers are also looking to keep LeBron, and I don't know if they're willing to, if their thought process is, look, it doesn't matter if LeBron doesn't like it, too bad, he can leave, or if their thought process is more like, maybe LeBron's going to like this move because LeBron knows that he's a good head coach. LeBron has had a lot of, I would put it, mediocre head coaches throughout his career. Not bad, but like mediocre. I think Dan Hurley would probably be one of the better head coaches that he's had. I guess the Lakers, they're sort of doing a little bit of both, trying to attract Dan Hurley and LeBron at the same time. And I guess maybe getting Dan Hurley instead of JJ Redick might make him want to leave. I don't know. But yeah, I agree.
Well, it seems from everything that Adrian Wojnarowski has provided that LA is. I don't even think JJ Redick's a conversation right now. See, the first tweet said the Los Angeles Lakers are targeting Connecticut's Dan Hurley to become franchise's next coach and preparing a massive long-term contract offer. Then his next tweet said that the Lakers have had a preliminary contact and the sides are planning to escalate discussions in the coming days. He's been at the forefront of the Lakers search, and they just ended the night with saying that the Lakers and UConn are meeting on Friday in California, and that the Lakers are targeting him, and they're making a full court press for Dan Hurley. It says the Lakers over the next few days are in full court press to convince Dan Hurley to come to LA. So it would seem that the Lakers already have made their decision.
Yeah, so they're just waiting on Dan Hurley to respond to that decision, essentially.
And it would be kind of awkward if Dan Hurley doesn't take it, because then the guy to take it would just be like the second option.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we don't even really know if JJ Redick wanted to be the Lakers head coach. There were just rumors about it because LeBron hosts a podcast with him. Like, we don't know if he even wanted to. Like, look, JJ Redick I don't know if he'll be a good head coach or not, but he is a really good commentator, and he's really good on TV and really good as a podcast host. The truth is, being on TV, he might prefer just commentating on the games on TV than actually traveling with an NBA team and having a lot of pressure on him all the time. It's not like that wouldn't be that sounds like it very well could be true, that he just would rather be on TV than be a head coach. Because being a head coach, that's a lot of pressure, whereas it's much more comfortable to just talk about the games on TV, which he does very well. Right. So, that all would make sense too. So we don't even know if he wanted it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was even something that was even going to be offered.
Yeah, maybe not.
For him to want it, but I think it would be a good move for both sides, honestly.
Yeah. So a little bit more gambling news. There was an MLB player banned for life. So wait, I'm trying to pronounce his name. His name was a guy on the Padres was banned for life. His name is Tucupita Marcano. and he was betting on games that on his own team. Yeah, he was betting on. So he was on when he was on the Pirates. He was betting on. I believe it was because he was betting on games that he was actually involved in, which is why he was, which is why he was banned. There's been a load of other players too, actually, who apparently were caught gambling.
Yeah.
Apparently, he was caught in. Apparently, he was. I read something that one of the times he was betting, he was in a Padres facility. And so, yeah, okay, so here it is. He placed 387 baseball bets, including 231 MLB related ones. So, really 231 over 2 periods in 2022 and 2023 when he was on the Pirates and while he was on the injured list. He gambled more than 150,000 on baseball with 87,319 of that on MLB related bets. So, that is an insane amount of money to be betting on your own sport. So the extent is that the MLB investigation said that there's no evidence to suggest that any outcomes in the games that he placed bets on were compromised or influenced or manipulated in any way. Supposedly, I mean, the NBA found the same thing about Tim Donaghy. So I don't know how much.
Well, but a referee can influence an NBA can influence a result much more than a player in baseball. But
right, I agree. I'm just saying.
But yeah, I mean, stuff is going to happen frequently. There were 4 in all the sports. There were 4 guys right now, or 5 guys total, I guess, with this guy that we're talking about. 4 other players besides him were suspended a year. A's Michael Kelly, Padres Jay Groom, Phillies Jose Rodriguez, and Diamondbacks Andrew Saalfrank. They were caught because when they were caught because they were the only 5 guys in the country betting on baseball, so it was pretty easy to find them. But yeah, I mean, it's going to happen more and more and more. And I don't really know if guys getting suspended for a year or like a year suspension, honestly, I don't think really does much. It happened in the Premier League in soccer. One of the better players on a team, he was betting on games for his team. He was suspended for a year. He came back and, has been good and played really well. And Calvin Ridley's played really well. So I don't really know how much of a deterrent, honestly, a year suspension is. In terms of what you could win. If you could win that money anyway, then yeah, I don't know if it's that big of a deterrent.
You know what? I see what you're saying. In my view, it probably is. I think it depends on. I think it depends on who it is.
Yeah.
Your type of standing that you have. I think that I mean, look, I can't get into the heads of NBA or NFL or any professional athlete or any other individual other than myself. But what I can tell you, and you're probably the same way, is that, I don't want to get into any trouble or go down that road. Like, my view is I don't want to go down that road. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I would feel. For me, getting suspended for 2 weeks would be a pretty big deterrent. It's not for everybody. Some people are really stupid and really don't have a good what is it? Your frontal cortex, which like calculates risk and what's a good idea and what's not. I think it's got to be something, though. I mean, Calvin Ridley, he was suspended for a year. He was able to come back, but his image is a little bit, maybe not so much, like not in the same way that Pete Rose's image is, but like everybody's going to remember Calvin Ridley, no matter how good of a wide receiver he becomes, for betting on sport, for betting on football, and he was caught just from using like a DraftKings app. It doesn't even seem like he had a gambling addiction or anything like that. It sounds like he was just being really stupid. And you don't want to make the headlines for that reason as a professional athlete. Like, it can only hurt you. And you know what? Getting suspended for a whole year, you might be right. It might not be that big of a deterrent, but it's also like the first warning. And you know what? Getting suspended for a year, it takes a lot to get suspended for a year. Like, you know what you have to do to get suspended for a year? Like, if you beat your wife, there's a good chance you won't get suspended for a year in professional sports. So you have to do a lot of really, like, or if you do anything, almost anything illegal, you likely won't get suspended for a whole year. So, like, it is a pretty, like, I'm not going to deny that it's a pretty harsh punishment. And if you get caught doing it again, you get banned for life. So, it still is, I don't know. For me, like, I think it really just depends. I mean, for somebody like Jonte Porter, who apparently was in severe gambling debts, and he was probably desperate to get out of that, which is why he basically threw games. So, and for him, it might not have been that big of a, it might not have been that big of a deterrent because it seems like he was addicted to gambling. And if you're an addict, well, you know, a lot of alcoholics drive drunk. It's like, I guess driving drunk, potentially killing yourself or somebody else might not be that big of a deterrent. I guess if you're desperate or something like that, it really wouldn't be.
Yeah, but again, like the example you gave of you didn't want to get suspended at work. Yeah, I agree with that. But the risk here is the reward of the risk is a lot more than what we're looking at. Where, like, if you're Andrew Salfrank, you know, who the hell is that? So the point is that if he could bet on games with inside knowledge and stuff like that and clean up, then yeah, why not? Honestly, because I got suspended for a year. Like, okay, I don't really know if, like, Calvin Ridley having an image that he bet on games, I don't really know how bad that is, especially considering, I mean, what some people have done, especially in the NFL. So I don't know if any of that matters enough. Yeah. But this was, I mean, listen, I think that also the legalizing of gambling in the United States with apps and stuff like that has done I think the only thing, honestly, that it's done has made it easier to catch people doing this. I think that someone would have to be kind of naive to think that stuff like this hasn't been going on for a long time.
I mean, objectively, it has.
Correct. So I think that it made it easier. So I think that when a lot of people are coming out and saying, "Oh, you knew this was going to be a problem once they legalized it," I think it's been something that's been going on. I mean, Pete Rose was suspended in the 70s for doing it. I mean, you're talking about over 50 years ago. You're talking about the Black Sox was over 100 years ago. So this has been, going on. It's just now that we have these apps and stuff, it's easier to catch people. And that I think the MLB is sort of not just the MLB, but there's more of this want to make examples out of people. And I think the MLB is more inclined now to be public with the stuff that they figured out, because where maybe I'm sure they knew about a bunch of stuff and were either less public with it or stuff like that. I mean, I'm a huge, I don't know if you're a subscriber to this belief, but I'm a huge subscriber to the belief that Michael Jordan was suspended 2 years for gambling.
For gambling on basketball?
Yeah, and that's why he went to play baseball. I believe that one.
I kind of do. I mean, look, I don't have any proof of it. I think that Michael Jordan's whole thing of going to play baseball for 2 years when he was like the face of the NBA was a little odd, seemed a little odd to me. Mm-hmm. And look, Michael Jordan gambled a lot. I don't know if he was gambling, if he was necessarily an addict, but he was so wealthy that Michael Jordan is so wealthy that he can almost afford to be a gambling addict. And it certainly is possible. And you know what? If they caught him, do you think they would ever let that go public?
Correct.
Like they never would let that go public. And to Correct. Me, I'm not when it comes to conspiracy theories, I am not a conspiracy theorist, nor am I closed off to the idea of conspiracies, because some things throughout history, including in sports, have been conspiracy theories. Just objectively, some things have just been conspiracies. And I mean, even though a lot of conspiracy theorists and people who believe in them are very silly and believe them for a lot of silly reasons, that doesn't mean conspiracy theories never happen. Look, David Stern is not so dumb that he would have let that come out. The face of the league betting on sports, betting on that sport would be just awful. And yeah, I mean, you do bring up a good point, which is that, like, I can't stand when people like would make this about legalized gambling when really it has nothing to do with legalized gambling, because baseball, I mean, this has always been an issue on some level. The professional, I mean, gambling has gone on, like whether it was legal or illegal, and just obviously you're more likely to catch it when it's done legally than when it's done illegally. But also in some of the states that these are happening in, they're actually not even, like, gambling is not legal in California, right? Sports gambling is not legal in California. Right. So what point is that even making? I mean, the biggest scandals that have happened with gambling were when it was illegal.
Well, but he did it, to be fair, though, he did do that in Pittsburgh, he
did it in Pittsburgh. Okay.
But yes, I understand what you're saying.
Like the Black Sox, I mean, they threw the World Series. And part of that is because players they had to get side jobs. It was just obviously a very different time. But also you have to consider the fact that, like, when it's underground, sports gambling is run by the mafia or groups like the mafia. It's run by criminals. I would rather have DraftKings and FanDuel and these betting apps run sports gambling in this country than criminal organizations. Like, obviously that it's just going to be a lot worse in that sense. And the thing is, I think that the reason people have this reaction is because it's something new. It's something new. Sports gambling being legal is a new thing to a lot of people. I mean, it just is new. And because of that, it's easy to blame sports gambling being legal for any sort of problem that happens. I would assume that people had similar attitudes after Prohibition ended. It would be like if somebody drives drunk, like after Prohibition, and somebody drives drunk and hits a tree or something like that, and you'd be like, well, you see what happens when we legalize alcohol, except that happened during Prohibition too. It's the same exact argument here. And a lot of people criticize the leagues for being involved with the apps. I don't have an issue with that, really, nor do I believe it's hypocritical if they punish players for like we heard this argument a lot with Calvin Ridley, which was that it was hypocritical for the NFL to suspend him for a year when they're working with the gambling companies. But, like, that's not the point. Like, the point that the NFL is making is not it's bad that you're gambling. It's that it's bad that you're gambling on your own sport. That's obviously a lot different. And when the NFL advertises, or any sports league for that matter, advertises gambling, they're advertising it for fans and people not involved in the league. They're not advertising players doing it. So obviously, like, there's no other way they should handle it other than, like, the way they're doing it, which is like, you're banned for life if you get caught doing this, or you're banned or you get suspended for a year if you're caught betting on your own sport, something like that. That's the only way it really should be handled. Because and you were talking about setting an example, but I would argue it's not setting an example. That's just exactly what it is, what the punishment is. Everybody who's caught gambling on their own sport, they always get punished harshly.
Well, coming out with it is setting an example. Is the setting an example part? Putting it in the headlines is setting an example.
Right, but the point is, like, when I think of setting an example, it's not like they were overly harsh on this individual to set an example. I think it's more that, like, okay, this is going to happen to everybody else. Like that's just what the punishment is, and they have to do that. I mean, they absolutely have to. It is never okay for players to bet on their own sports. It is horrible for the image of these leagues, and, like, there's really no better. Like, that's kind of just how they have to handle it.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I completely agree that it's ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous for people to say that the company shouldn't promote gambling. It's hypocritical to promote gambling and then getting suspended. I mean, would it be hypocritical for a bar to fire a bartender for drinking? Of course not. They're advertising drinking, but you can't drink behind a bar, right? So it's a similar thing, but rules happen. I mean, so I completely agree with that, but yeah, I think that the leagues are more fine to come out with this stuff because they want you to see that Deontay Porter was suspended for life. They want you to see that Calvin Ridley. I'm talking about I'm talking about people who would be inclined to bet that are members of the league or employees of the league. I mean, it's employees as well. Like, I'm sure when you were an employee at Major League Baseball, you couldn't gamble on games, MLB games. So to those people as well. So I think that they're much more happy to be public with this stuff when, we don't know the full story. Like I would be interested in the full story of the scope of what had happened with Michael Jordan. I mean, I know if you watch the Tim Donaghy documentary that he was about to go undercover with a wire the next, I think, a day in the next week or whatever it was before it came out that he got arrested. He was going to go undercover with a wire and expose a bunch of refs who were also on the take for someone or someone else, organized crime and stuff like that. But then the New York Post went public that he had gotten arrested. So of course no one would talk to him. But the NBA was, it seemed from the documentary, instrumentally happy to have that come out about Donaghy and not have him go undercover because there was a lot of refs who were probably on the take and the leagues probably knew about it and just didn't, do anything or whatever. And so I think the scope of how much gambling has gone on in a lot of sports, certainly it's been exemplified with legalized gambling and how enshrined gambling has become into the culture. Because, I mean, the difference in the last 4 or 5 years from you couldn't even mention gambling to what it is now, where if you look at ESPN and MLB Network and NFL Network and whatever the ticker they put on the bottom of scores, they put the gambling lines next to them now. They put gambling lines on everything. They have ESPN has its own gambling app. So the difference in 5-6 years has been astronomical. But I do think that this stuff has been going on for a really long time.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, like I said, it would be naive to think that it didn't go on for a long time. I mean, like if somebody, like, it's just obvious that when you use an app, you can be, especially when you're using the app of a company that is working with the league that you're playing for, you're much more likely to be caught than if you do it with a bookie or something like that.
Right.
Like,
and it's easier to get caught now.
Sense.
And it's just easier to get caught now for everything, not just gambling. Just everything in general is easier to get caught with now, with phones and internet and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, it's just easier to get caught. But yeah, of course, there's been so much of it going on in the past, and so I think that's a dumb take that a lot of people had of the anti-gambling people, but yeah, I mean, I don't really know though what you can really do besides what the leagues are doing now to curb it. With that being said, I don't want somebody suspended for life over whatever. I mean, I think that Deontay Porter deserved to be suspended for life because he was actually betting on himself and then coming out of games.
Yeah, he was betting against himself.
He should be suspended for life. And this guy should be suspended for life for betting on his own team. I agree with that, but I don't think that people should normally be suspended for, banned for life. But I also don't know what they can do to curtail it. I mean, again, like to talk about the astronomical differences. I mean, Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays were actually delayed 10 years from going into the Hall of Fame because they were banned for, I guess, the 10 years or whatever because they were greeters at an Atlantic City casino.
Yeah.
They weren't even gambling. And now you have all, being embedded with the gambling companies. But it does, like, did you see that Anthony Edwards tweet before Game 4?
No, which one?
So it was FanDuel. I want to find the exact. It was FanDuel had tweeted, because FanDuel has obviously their own Instagram and Twitter accounts. But they tweeted. I want to find the exact tweet. I can't find the exact tweet, but there was an interview with Anthony Edwards before Game 4 of the this is it. I found it. So Anthony Edwards said, "You're gonna see tonight. I'm gonna be putting up a lot of shots." He said that before. I believe it was Game 4 of the Timberwolves Maverick series, and FanDuel Sportsbook tweeted from FanDuel Sportsbook's own account, tweeted what he had said, and then they said, "I'm about to absolutely hammer the over on Anthony Edwards 26.5." That kind of tweet should be illegal.
Yeah. Wait. So
FanDuel said it's posted the quote, "You're going to see tonight. It's going to be a lot of shots." Then they said, FanDuel, "about to absolutely hammer the over on Anthony Edwards 26.5 points line." Hammer emoji. That should be illegal.
What did they take it down?
No, it's right here from May 26th.
So it's still up. That's insane. I didn't even notice that.
And by the way, he scored 26 points, by the way. The line was 26.5. But I mean, all of the comments, they got completely ratioed. All of the comments were basically saying that this should completely be illegal. But that stuff should be illegal. But I think there's a fine line when it comes to stuff like that right now.
Yeah, obviously. There obviously is a fine line. And some people were talking about bring up Ohtani and things like that. It's like, oh well, if only he had an interpreter. I don't know. I think that whole narrative is kind of silly.
But they again, like the other thing that you should never do, by the way, is if you go onto DraftKings and FanDuel, never take a parlay that they give you.
Yeah, never do it. They never hit.
Never.
Never hit.
Not even close. And it's like the biggest, like you'll get like 300% back if it hits or something.
Yeah.
Like but yeah, I mean, I just think we're in a very fine line in sports right now that it's been going on, but now it's being so overly promoted. And now also one thing that's different when you were betting with, a bookie or a loan shark or whatever versus now is you can bet on absolutely everything. I mean, you could bet on Jonte Porter's under points. You could bet on rebounds. You could bet on. Well, not anymore. But you could bet on a team first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. You could bet during the NFL. During NFL games, you could bet on. You could bet on like what the outcome of the drive is going to be.
You could bet on the coin toss.
I don't know if you saw these people. So there were these people that were in England. It was a BBC documentary talking about gambling, but basically they would go and find. So in tennis, the judge, like the not the line judge, but what's the guy called? The umpire, is that the umpire that sits?
I think
it's
called the
chair umpire, whatever.
Yeah, the chair umpire.
Anyway, he has to log in a point. So say it's 40-15 Djokovic and Alcaraz wins a point, then he logs in that it makes it 40-30. So there were people who would they would go to tournaments around the world and they would find the slowest judges that they could. And what they would do was if Djokovic is up 40-15 and Alcaraz wins the next point, they would bet on Alcaraz to win the next point before the guy could log the point in.
So they're cheating the system.
Correct. But they went around and did it, around the world. And it was like, they were like professionals at doing it. But the point is to say that you really can place a bet on anything.
But did they have to give the money back? That's blatantly stealing.
I'm not. I think they got. I'm not sure what happened with them. Whether they got arrested or whatever. It was through a BBC documentary about they were in England and they were in England and they were like relaying it. They could be in Abu Dhabi or some Dubai, and they would relay it to a guy in England, and right. The guy, the chair, and they would know like they were really professionals at it. They would know which umpires were really slow at logging it in, weren't as quick, and stuff like that. So you can bet on anything, and there's always going to be ways to. People are always going to try and find ways to make it to make money. So, yeah. I know that it's like, okay, we knew that was going to happen, but again, it's been going on for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do want to get into a little more. So there's some of this Caitlin Clark weird shenanigans going on in the WNBA. I never really thought I'd be talking much about the WNBA. It's also led to a lot of weird sports media scandals, for lack of a better term, I would say. So basically, it was all because of what was a cheap shot from another, what was her name, Kennedy Carter, on Caitlin Clark. In the grand scheme of things, this doesn't have to be a huge deal. I mean, it's not the only time we've seen a cheap shot. But I mean, I'm not going to pretend it wasn't a cheap shot. And I mean, I don't know much about women's basketball. Maybe fights happen more often. You might know better than me. I mean, to me, my reaction was, okay, this is a cheap shot. That's a flagrant foul. End of story, I guess, in a sense. Am I crazy for thinking that?
I actually didn't think it was that bad. I mean, I didn't think it was that flagrant. What about the guy? I sent you this. A guy said that the person should have been charged with assault.
No, of course I don't think that.
Those people, by the way, same thing with the
a guy called into Francesa and said Matt Harvey should be arrested for throwing at a batter.
Correct, and the same thing with the Myles Garrett thing. I don't understand how these people exist in everyday life. Every single foul in the NBA, every single play in the NFL will be assault outside of an NFL. Every single play.
Right.
So it's just so ridiculous. Yeah, I agree. Just move on. And it was just exemplified because it was Caitlin Clark. I mean, there's flagrant fouls in every level of basketball in every game. So I agree.
Yeah, I mean, look, it was obviously flagrant. I'm not now the flip side is I'm not going to pretend it was a basketball play. It wasn't. Like if Patrick Beverly did this or Draymond Green did this, we would all just say this was obviously a dirty hit, and we wouldn't defend them. But at the same time, it wasn't like career threatening, or it wasn't something that could end your career or anything like that. I think that I mean, look, it's not the first time we've seen rookies who are getting a lot of attention, getting targeted in a sense. I mean, it's happened in the NBA too. I think that my biggest issue is where were her teammates? If that happened in the NBA, that would start a fight. I
don't think they really like her, honestly.
Or maybe it's
you remember when Magic Johnson got the biggest contract in NBA history, his teammates were pissed off about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how much her teammates like her, honestly.
Or maybe they're. I mean, the truth is, the Indiana Fever are not a good team, and
they're horrible.
They're horrible, and they probably just don't have a lot of heart. But if you were gonna, I mean, look, if that were to happen in the NBA now, if a cheap shot like that were to happen now, it would obviously just start a fight, or at least a fight until the refs broke it up. That I would say would be my biggest. It would be my biggest issue with that, and also it's Yeah, Magic Johnson's teammates may have been pissed about it because of his new contract. I don't think that happens much in the NBA anymore because they make so much money anyway. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of resentment towards any NBA player making a lot of money anymore. It just doesn't, because they know that they're going to be next.
Right.
And to me, jealousy and resentment, I get that it's a natural thing, but it's not a good thing either. And I don't know, her own, I mean, I don't know if it's true that her teammates don't like her or not. That could be accurate. I don't know. It could just be that they don't, it could just be that this is more common in the WNBA. Something like this could just be more common. I mean, in the NBA, it happens sometimes too, although it not as much anymore. The NBA really, they really, the WNBA is way behind the NBA. And the thing is, though, it's like people were talking about, like you're talking about Magic Johnson's teammates not being happy about his new contract. I mean, Magic and Bird saved the NBA. They really did save the NBA, which ended up being good for everybody else. So,
right.
Just
like I think it's going to happen now.
Right. Caitlin Clark gets more attention than you do. I don't know. Hating on her for, I don't know. She didn't choose that. I mean, if anybody was offered $28 million from Nike, you would take it. I just don't blame her for that. And this led to all of these weird social media things with Stephen A. Smith and Monica McNutt. And basically it led to I don't know. I don't know how this conversation went. I wanted to get a sound of it for the show, but the conversation was so long and it would have been really out of context. So I couldn't really get a good sound. But it ended up turning into this thing where Stephen A. Smith basically said, who talks more about women's basketball or women's sports than First Take? And she said, well, 3 years ago, you could have done this 3 years ago with your platform. And then Stephen A. Smith went on his own podcast and said, well, you know what? You're right. Maybe I could have done more, but I also could have done less. And he's right. He's right about that. He doesn't have to promote anything. The idea that just 3 years ago, the idea that the WNBA would have ever been popular would have felt so odd to us. And that's 3 years ago. And to me, it's now some of what he should have said was ultimately his reasonings for this he kind of missed the mark a little bit. But what he should have said was, look, I'm not a WNBA employee. What do you want me to, the WNBA for so many years didn't even promote themselves. Why should I promote a product that the product is not even willing to promote themselves? That would have been the right answer, obviously. I don't know. The whole thing just seems kind of silly to me.
Yeah, I agree. So I think it's just that there's just not a lot to talk about in sports right now. And then, so little things like this, just, I think the First Take is looking for little things like this. To talk about. Yeah. But I also do agree that they could have talked to that he's saying that, well, no one talks about women's sports like us, but they did only just start recently. I do agree with that as well, though. It was, he's clearly looking for praise when he just started doing it with everybody else.
Right. But the thing is, neither was anybody else. And so I saw this thing on Awful Announcing, and Awful Announcing, it's not my favorite site because they're kind of like if Funhouse had a site in a sense. How Funhouse always hides behind its veil of anonymity and attacks other sports media, like sports radio hosts or any members of sports media, and just to make them look bad a lot. And basically, so Colin Cowherd said, so I didn't see the video because I just came across it. And he says, I hear this push. And Colin Cowherd said, I hear this pushback. Well, how come you guys didn't cover us before Caitlin Clark? And he said, because you weren't that popular. I don't cover hockey because the average sports fan can't name 3 players. I don't cover regular season baseball much. I don't cover college basketball, men's or women's, much before March. You need to be made before I talk about you. It's not my job to make you popular. Yes, he's exactly right. It's not his job to make you popular. It's his job to talk about what people are talking about. Which makes the whole conversation just really stupid. Yeah, he's 100% right. Like he talks about what you like, just like what we kind of do. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, I do agree with that. I just think that Stephen A. Smith was looking for more praise when it.
Yeah,
I guess that's like he was kind of out there looking for praise though as well.
Yeah, well, it did. I guess it did kind of sound like that. So I do want to talk a little bit about Djokovic pulling out of the French Open. You saw this. So he apparently it was his meniscus or something like that. Was that? Yeah, it was his the heavy favorite to win the French Open. Djokovic, he doesn't get injured.
He wasn't the favorite to win the French Open.
What's that?
Alcaraz was the favorite to win the French Open.
Oh, he was?
Yeah.
Okay.
But Djokovic was one of the favorites.
One of the favorites.
But yeah, I mean, Djokovic has actually had a couple more injury issues in the last couple of years, because he was actually pretty good compared to some of the other ones of the big four. But he was playing the match that he won. I forget who he played against in that last match that he won. You could see he was sort of limping to the finish there.
Yeah.
And besides that, I thought that he's had a couple of injury issues recently, and so I actually wasn't that surprised. But I mean, a knee injury is as bad as it gets, especially playing tennis. So I don't know if he's what his future is going to be right now for this year, at least, because they've got a grueling events coming up. Because remember, they're going back to France after Wimbledon to play in the Olympics. So they're actually going Paris, back to London, then to New York. So I don't know if I would assume he's maybe probably questionable for Wimbledon right now.
Yeah, he probably. I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, I don't know if he'll be able to play in Wimbledon. I mean, a knee is tough to come back from. I mean, I don't think it'll. I mean, compared to say Nadal or Andy Murray, Djokovic has had far fewer injuries. I mean, Federer and Djokovic are similar in the sense that they didn't have that many injury problems. Federer didn't really get injured a lot until he was really old, whereas Nadal was injured all the time.
Correct.
And I think that even though Djokovic, I mean, it feels like Nadal is really old, but he's only a year older than Djokovic.
Right.
But it feels like Djokovic has at least 5 more years than Nadal has left.
Yeah,
so,
Nadal probably has none left.
Yeah, probably none, if anything, and he's going to retire very soon.
Did you see this stat, by the way, that the weeks at world number one? So Djokovic has been at world number one in his career for 428 weeks. Federer 310 weeks. Nadal 209. Murray 41. So that's 19 years, combined 19 years at number one for 4 guys, which is just to say that we've actually probably just lived through the greatest era of men's tennis.
Yeah,
in terms of having all those guys.
Yeah,
together.
We very clearly did. I mean, just imagine how good any of them individually would have been if one of them wasn't there.
Correct. And by the way, to say that the era is over, which it is, but Murray, who obviously had a lot more injury problems and was never on the level of the other 3, but he was at 41 weeks at a number one. Alcaraz has already been 38.
Yeah.
So Alcaraz is going to be, I think, probably once Djokovic leaves, I think Alcaraz will definitely be, like the undisputed number one.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about this a little bit. Gilbert Arenas, he said he's causing backlash because he said, this is what he had to say about Steph Curry.
But to be real, how many teams have won without generational talent?
Steph is not a generational talent.
Detroit?
Detroit.
Steph Curry's.
Steph is not a generational.
Steph not a generational.
You know what a generational? Wemby is a generational person. That is a generational talent.
Steph became
a great generational means you can't mimic it. You can't mimic. You can't
mimic
at
number one.
Well, you said you can't. Can you mimic Magic Johnson, 6'9" point guard with the vision? No. You can't mimic Shaquille O'Neal's body.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
You can't mimic fucking LeBron James. Those you can't mimic Wemby. Those are generational.
I agree.
It only comes once every. Right. There's only.
Okay, so I'll stop it there. I think this is a bit absurd. The idea that that Wemby is a generational talent, but Steph Curry isn't, is just obviously a crazy thing to say. Steph, I mean, obviously you don't need to have a generational talent to win a finals or multiple finals. But the idea that like you can duplicate what Steph Curry did is just crazy. That's obviously not true. He is the best. I think Gilbert Arenas has lost his mind. By the way, I want to give credit to Gilbert Arenas' podcast. It's called the No Chill podcast. It is on the it's called the No Chill podcast on hold on. Yeah, it's called the No Chill podcast with Gilbert Arenas on the Fubo Sports Network. So I just want to give credit. But yeah, what he's saying I think is just absolutely absurd. I don't see how anybody we will never see another Steph Curry. Nothing like you can't duplicate that. Just like you can't duplicate LeBron, Magic, Kareem, anything like that. I don't know. This is ridiculous.
I kind of agree with Gilbert Arenas. Because I feel like you can though. I agree that Steph Curry is a great shooter, but I feel like you can mimic that. You could mimic that, and everybody now because of Steph Curry shoots threes, and so a lot of guys shoot threes. But the like a player like Wembanyama, he's generational because there's no one else that can mimic his size, speed, an ability, just like Magic Johnson, like you said, or LeBron James. But I agree. But everybody kind of is a great 3-point shooter. Is a 3-point shooter now? Steph Curry is just a great 3-point shooter. But I don't know. Ray Allen was a great 3-point shooter. I mean, I just think that Steph Curry definitely changed the game. But I kind of see what Gilbert Arenas is saying.
But the thing is, Steph Curry is not just an amazing 3-point shooter. He's also an amazing shot creator. He's almost as good as a shot creator as he is a shooter, which is part of the. I mean, look, he's affected the game a lot. More guys are going to shoot threes. I don't think that. I think you can try to imitate him, but I don't think it'll ever be duplicated. I guess you could say the same thing about Kobe and Michael Jordan. Kobe played a lot like Michael Jordan did. I guess by that logic, Michael Jordan wouldn't have been a generational talent because other players play similar to the way he does. And I don't know, we haven't seen any point guards similar. I would be shocked if I saw another point guard similar to Steph Curry. I mean, maybe it'll happen at some point, but it'll be a pretty big thing, I would say. I think it's the type of thing that can be imitated but not duplicated.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously just think Steph Curry is one of the greats, but I do see Gilbert Arenas' point. I can definitely see his point. I mean, I think that a lot of people could figure out that kind of game.
Yeah.
I mean, Doncic is a great 3-point shooter. Like, I don't know. I feel like I do see the fact that, I don't know if he's as much of a generational talent as, I think that, Durant is a generational talent because I don't think anyone will ever be able to score like Durant. Durant can never be stopped. Durant either makes the shot or he misses it, and it's just impossible to stop him. But so I think he's in that vein but Curry, I agree, he changed the game. It's just, is he on that same talent. Like, oh, you'll never see another Magic Johnson or never see Wembanyama or whatever.
Yeah. So I did you see? I just want to end on this. I don't know if you saw this Darren Waller music video. He's getting clowned on social media because of this music video that he put out. And it was basically about his divorce with Kelsey Plum. And Kelsey Plum, he was only married to her. They were only married for a year. And based on what she tweeted, it really implied that he messed up or pissed her off in some way. And then he made a music video about it. In today's day and age of social media, he made a lot of really dumb decisions, it seems like. When you're a professional athlete and you put out a music video about a divorce you just had, you're going to be made fun of a lot. And maybe he doesn't care. But I mean, like, it is kind of funny, the response to all this.
Yeah, I mean, he had a few like incidents like that after the divorce. And they got married a year ago. They actually got married because she's on the Las Vegas Aces and he was on the Las Vegas Raiders. And then I think he got traded like a week after they got married or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think they were probably doomed from the start. But yeah, I mean, he was getting absolutely ratioed. And clowned, and it's just not a good look, especially for someone who's looking to get extended by the Giants. And he didn't have a good year at all. He was very much what people warned about Darren Waller. He was injured a lot, and he just wasn't that great overall because he wasn't available. So hopefully. Obviously it's a lot of people go through it during breakups, but we're going to have to see. It's not good for, it's not a good outlook for his play on the field if he's acting like this after a breakup.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to say thanks for tuning in, everybody. We got to get to bed. Or you do, I don't. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. This was Moving the Goalposts. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick DiMart, Liam at Liam MTGP. You can follow the show at MTGP ETB. You can follow on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can follow all the Empty the Bench shows on ETB. I'm sorry, etbpodcast.com and youtube.com/ETB Network. You can follow the Empty the Bench Network on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at ETB Network. We'll be back next week.